if we never lose track of that, then we'll always have a source of energy and inspiration in our practice to overcome and be patient with the difficulties, the pains of sitting meditation, which everybody knows about, the frustrations of a mind that's not peaceful, the difficulties of the external conditions, living with other people, the heat, the flies, whatever it is. If we keep coming back to metta, we will always have a source of energy, like an endless source of energy. We have to keep coming back to it, cultivating it. So when we chanted about the 4 araka gammatanas, the 4 meditations that we preserve and practice regularly, metta is one of them. It's just fundamental to the whole path of practice. And it's a good way to begin your meditation, to cultivate the thought of goodwill, kindness to oneself and then to others. People often ask how we do that, and there are many techniques. There's no one technique, maybe, but traditionally we are working on 2 aspects of our personality. There's the intellect, and then there's the emotion. So the emotion is a very positive emotion, metta. Intellectually, well, it's a very positive thought. The thought, may I be well, may I be free from suffering, free from hostility, free from anxiety, just as we chant. And then may all beings be well, free from hostility, free from suffering. And you use the recitation to take care of your intellect, give it something to do, something to think about that's positive, useful, wholesome. But then you're consciously developing the emotional side as well. So you're focusing on a feeling. Obviously, when there's metta in the mind, there's going to be a pleasant feeling, sukha vedana, and it's something you can literally feel inwardly. So a very common way to practice metta is focus on the heart, physical heart region, because that's the center of emotions. When they emerge into the experience of body and mind, they tend to emerge from the heart, both positive and negative emotions. So if you can calm the heart area by bringing up a feeling of metta there until it becomes firm and in one-pointed samadhi, then you have a very good foundation for dealing skillfully with all the other emotional states we experience, and particularly the states of suffering, aversion, hatred, fear, anxiety, and so on. So when we begin our meditation on metta, we focus on that area. We imagine the feeling or remember the feeling that we've had of goodwill. So that takes time. You have to really become familiar with that feeling. Obviously you feel at ease, relaxed. So you have to consciously relax the body. Any physical tension you're noticing, consciously relax that. Starting from the chest, the heart, but moving out around the body. And then emotional tension, stress, consciously relaxing. And you recite the formula to help. So, may I be well, may I be free from suffering. Again, to hold your attention, point your mind in the right direction. And you're aiming to one point the mind with mindfulness focused on the object, in this case metta. So no other thoughts, emotions can come in, gets to the point where the metta is so strong, continuous, nothing else can come into the mind, into the heart. So obviously, ill will, negativity just doesn't arise once you become one-pointed with metta. Until that point, you have to practice and train. And that's where sometimes we fall down, if we've got a lot of accumulated emotional pain, or even just a lot of mental sankharas, thinking about issues, past issues, current issues, even projecting it into the future. We have to work hard to bring up mindfulness of our theme. But you'll find when you do this, even if it's only for a period in the first part of your regular meditation, you'll get better at it. You become used to that feeling, the thought, holding your attention on it, and it sets up, like all skillful dhammas, kusala dhammas, it has a nourishing effect on the mind, and it's like the fertile ground for many other wholesome dhammas to arise. From metta, you naturally get karuna, compassion. Compassion for yourself, wishing yourself to be free from suffering, wishing others, wishing to help others avoid suffering. You're not just those who are suffering already, but to help others, to prevent them falling into more suffering in their lives, or yourself. And again, nourishes the mind both emotionally and intellectually. So if you practice metta meditation regularly, it starts to show in the way you feel about yourself, other people, and the way you think about yourself, other people, and you become more skillful in the practice of it. So you see how to practice metta in daily life as you interact with the world. You become more skillful at it, better at it. You learn how to preserve the feeling of metta and the thoughts of metta, but also how to make them more effective. Do it better. Sometimes in the beginning, we have an idea. I want to practice metta, have metta, but sometimes we're a bit clumsy in the way we apply it. Given you a few examples over the last few days. But it's a skill. You have to learn how to apply it in what's the best way. But then it also has to be balanced. So then the practice of upekkha, another one of the Brahmaviharas, acts as a balancing factor in your practice. Upekkha comes from understanding karma. All beings have their karma, have made karma, are experiencing the results of karma. And when you practice metta, you have to be ready that sometimes you don't see the results of your metta yet. Maybe the suffering or the problem that the person you're directing it to, or even yourself, is so great. You have to be very patient and accept nothing much I can do at the moment. You say, for instance, you fall ill. You might take a long time before you get through that illness. So, to stop your mind falling into despair or disappointment, or even giving up, saying, "Oh, what's the point of spreading metta? I've just got this illness." It balances your emotion and your thinking at that time to accept, well, I have this karmic obstacle come up, this illness. Even though I have goodwill, the way I apply it at this time is not simply, even though I wish myself to be free from the illness, I don't just expect that to happen just like that. I have to keep cultivating metta and be patient until I'm free from the illness. And it's the same with others. If you're going to help someone because of your metta, speak to them, help them, well, you need upekkha to balance it, This is the wisdom faculty as well, understanding the right time, the right place, the right way to help somebody. And there's nothing fixed, is there? Sometimes we have to really sit down and think what's appropriate when you're helping someone according to their situation. For example, something that just popped into my mind, there was one time I knew a park ranger in Thailand, in the national park, and he's a man with great metta, supports monks, helps people in many different ways, made a lot of good karma in his life. And he, one time, two bear cubs, somebody brought him 2 bear cubs. They were orphaned, and they said, can you look after them? Because he lives right in the middle of the national park, surrounded by jungle. They thought it was appropriate, and they knew he was a kind man. So he said, yes, okay, because he knew what he was getting into. So he took on these 2 bear cubs, and he said, for the first few months, him and his wife, they got kids, but the kids have grown up and left home. So him and his wife, it's just like having babies again. Every day, bottles of milk, cleaning up the mess, feeding them endlessly. Any free moment was just feeding these bears and cleaning up after them, making a big mess. Gradually they got bigger, and he said he had to change some of the way he treated them, because as they get bigger they get more physically strong. You can't treat them like babies anymore, you have to have a little bit of restraint, so sometimes you'd have to lock them in a room. But that room would get trashed, because they're bears and they're hungry and incurious. They have lots of patience cleaning up the mess and the damage. You also had to be careful, because as they get bigger, their claws were bigger. Couldn't treat them like babies and let kids cuddle them anymore or anything like that. Had to be a bit more careful. Endlessly being called home from work. We had an office in the national park, and he was always going out into the jungle, always being called back to sort out problems with these 2 growing bears. And final straw, one day he locked them in for their own protection and for the protection of the public, but then they broke out, because they're so strong now. They broke into another cabin nearby looking for food, and the male bear, it was a male and a female, the male bear found a biscuit tin, that old-fashioned biscuit tins, which are like large rectangular biscuit tins with a glass front full of biscuits, and they have a lid, a metal lid you take off, and you can put your hand in and take one out. And the bear got that, and he took the lid off, ate all the biscuits, and he wanted to lick the crumbs, so he got the whole thing on his head and he got stuck. And then he got really upset because he couldn't get the biscuit tin off his head, so he started wandering around, and the park ranger got a call on his radio that there's a Ned Kelly bear going down the middle road of the park, cars swerving to avoid it. And when he arrived on his motorbike, this bear was just walking along. He said it looked like it was drunk, because it was so upset and so confused with this can stuck on its head. Couldn't see. It was just about to fall over a cliff into the river. So he managed to save it and took it back. And then him and his wife, they got the biscuit tin off, and they had a meeting, and they said, this is no longer viable. We can't look after these bears anymore. It's too dangerous for them, for us, for others. Now we have to let them go. They built up an attachment to them, so they had to deal with that, the pain of letting go of these 2 young bears, even though that was always their plan. So they took them off a long way away to another part of the national park, where they knew the forest was good and there was plenty of fruit and things they could eat. And they let them go, and they didn't want this bond to be a problem, so they decided not going to see them again. But then they're worried about them, so they let them go in the forest, and then every day he'd go with his binoculars and just spy on them where they are they getting any food. Did that for weeks, not meeting them, just spying on them to make sure they're okay until he felt confident they're okay. Then he left it. So if you help someone, you have metta, but then you've got to use wisdom. How are you going to help somebody? It's not just an attitude and a sort of, okay, I'm going to help you. You've got to think it through. So wisdom comes with metta. And you see that in your meditation. As you're meditating, you have your own pain, suffering, and difficulties, and you have to use some skillful means to deal with it. Sometimes just patience, sometimes just love, sometimes you have to think it through. What do I need to do here? What will work? How can I let go of this kind of suffering? How can I deal with it skillfully, resolve it? So metta also leads on to wisdom. So it has this nourishing effect on our mind. And as long as you keep returning to this theme of metta in your meditation, you'll find you probably grow and improve in your meditation more and more, and then it will spread out into your daily life, the way you interact with others. So the Buddha said, practice it every day, learn to really one-point your mind on the object of metta. You can also do karuna as a meditation, or mudita, the third brahmavihara. Mudita is, we say, appreciation of the success, the happiness of others, the good others have done. So it's the direct opposite of jealousy, competitiveness, rivalry, envy. And it just flows out of metta, that thought, may I be well, may others be well. It's directly flowing into mudita. When you see those who are suffering, you feel, may they be free from suffering, with your goodwill flows onto that. When you see those who are not suffering, or they're achieving happiness and success, well, there's the recognition of that, the acceptance, the happiness, and this is good. It's good for them, and it's actually good for us when we recognize the happiness of others and the good things others have done. If we don't, what does the mind do? It turns into rivalry, competitiveness, jealousy, and we can get caught into that. We damage our own state of mind, because these are unwholesome states to hold on to. We damage maybe our relations with other people when we display our jealousy, our rivalry. And certainly meditation doesn't go very well when we get caught into those states. So metta meditation naturally leads on to karuna, mudita. But then upekkha is always there to balance all three of these. Understanding in the end we all have our karma. If someone is making good karma, we can practice mudita, seeing this is going to lead to their happiness. It's good. We don't lose anything just because other people are doing good. Maybe it will spur us on to do more good. And when our mind opens to recognize the good in others, we feel happier and more content. When we see other people suffering, we know them. There's karmic reasons for this. It takes, when you meditate on these themes with mindfulness, it takes out this sense of personality. In the sense, often when we're not very clear, we sort of have this view, I deserve this suffering, or I deserve better than this, or they deserve suffering, or they deserve better than that, or they don't deserve their happiness and their success. When the mind is negative, without mindfulness, it becomes a very personal thing. But the whole point of the practice of upekkha is just seeing beyond that and seeing cause and result. Good actions lead to good results, bad actions, bad results. There's no person involved in that, so nobody deserves good or bad. With true equanimity, we're just seeing cause and result at work. And then we respond appropriately. So obviously if someone's suffering, we give them metta and karuna. If someone's successful, healthy, happy, well, we can practice mudita for them. So what do you do when you meet an enlightened teacher? They've got no more suffering, so you don't need to feel sorry for them, or no need to really help them because they've done it all. You practice mudita. So when you, say, in Thailand, when we used to go gather for different teachers on their birthday, you say you go to express mudita for the enlightened teacher. Because there's nothing actually they need from you, and there's nothing you have to go and help them through their suffering or something. You're just going to express mudita and respect, reverence, gratitude, and so on. But if someone is suffering, obviously not enlightened yet, well, we bring up karuna. But there's no sense of they deserve it, they deserve good or bad. It's just cause and effect. And the more we contemplate upekkha, the more we see that. It doesn't make us cold and indifferent to people who are suffering. It just gives us the skill to deal with it effectively. So once you understand cause and effect, well, obviously you might be able to give advice, teaching to someone so they can avoid getting into similar suffering. Can help them change their lifestyle or get through it in one way or other, but you're coming from a place of calm and wisdom with upekkha rather than taking it all personally. Obviously, if we take it too personally, when you're involved with suffering, then we start to suffer. So if you're helping someone who's suffering, then we start to absorb mentally, we take on their suffering, we start to own some of their suffering. If we don't see with upekkha, we see the karma of it, and so then you can't maybe help them so much because you're crying too much or too sad, too disappointed that this person is suffering. And most obviously is with our loved ones. If you can understand karma and have some upekkha in your mind when you're helping or dealing with a loved one who is suffering, you'll be able to help them better. Otherwise we get overcome by the negative emotion, the sadness or the fear, the worry, and the mind can't function so well, and wisdom can't function so well. So as we practice metta, naturally it leads on to the other three Brahmaviharas, and they're constant reflections, constant reference points you keep returning to in your day, in your meditation and in your day, in your life. And obviously we express these Brahmavihara Dhammas through speech, action, as well as thought. And you can see, in the human realm, there's actually the Brahmaviharas are there all the time. And nowadays the media tends to focus on the negative things in society, the tragedies, the conflicts, the problems of society, all the time. So often we see news, read news and so on, and often become very negative about the world. But we have to step back and see that actually the Brahmaviharas at work all the time around us. In every country of the world, people are practicing kindness, compassion all the time, often to the point where we don't notice it. It's so normal. Very simple things, just people, strangers helping each other out in very small ways or sometimes very big ways. Like when there's a bushfire, last week there's a bushfire in the Great Ocean Road. You see lots and lots of people providing volunteer support, helping people who've lost their house, and that, very spontaneously, very in a very natural way. The majority of human beings, that's how they behave. or families. We help children, we help elderly members of the family, people in trouble and so on. It's very natural to the point we forget what we're doing or forget to appreciate it. Certainly as a monk, you always are experiencing the kindness of other people because we're totally dependent on others for our food, our transport, our accommodation and so on. So all the monks, they know when you're walking back from Warburton, you're always getting asked, do you need a lift? Not just monks, but lay people come here and they miss the bus from Warburton, so they start walking. They're always getting offered lifts by total strangers. And that goes on all over the world every day. There's Brahmaviharas in practice that people sometimes we forget. And sometimes you hear stories of very unusual, special practices of the Brahmaviharas. Like someone was telling me the other day, they're talking about so many mass shootings in America and so much gun violence. It's very sad. They told me about one incident, one place. There's a man who one morning he's going to work and he lost the plot and he had a gun and he went into a school. It's run by a sect called the Amish sect. So it's a bit different from, say, ordinary school, you might say. And he went in, he was obviously completely deranged and angry at that time. He walked into a classroom and he separated the kids, all the girls, they're all between the age of 5 and 11. All the girls in one corner, all the boys in another, and he sent the teacher out, the boys out, and he had a gun. He shot 11 little girls. And 6 of them died, I think, on the spot. The others were injured. And obviously he was caught by the police and there was a trial. Oh no, he didn't, there wasn't a trial, he was shot. He died. So then there was lots of media coming around to the parents of this man who had shot these kids and then died himself. And they're always having an inquest, why did this happen? And some people blame the parents, and the parents were as traumatized as anyone else because they've lost their son in terrible situation. Now they've got to deal with the press and all the publicity. So they're traumatized, even though their son is the perpetrator of this deed. They're just as traumatized as anyone else. And then they had a funeral, and at the funeral, all the cameras, the journalists were there, and a lot of people maybe were there looking down on the family because they were there to bury their son who had committed this atrocity. But then at the funeral they saw all the families and the parents of the girls who had died standing there, and as all the press surrounded the car of this family who had come in to bury their son who had murdered all these people, the parents of all the kids he had murdered surrounded them to stop the press bothering them. And they stopped the press taking photos and stopped the press bothering them out of compassion. And they guided them through their funeral till they finished the funeral and gave them some privacy and space from the press. And the parents of these, the man who had done the murders, they went home totally surprised and pleasantly surprised that they had received such forgiveness and compassion from the families of the people that their son had murdered, the kids who they'd murdered. And that's how you practice metta and karuna, isn't it? If you're responsible and you're thinking straight, even in a situation like that where you tend to just be very angry with the family of someone who's murdered your own child, they didn't do that. They showed great personal responsibility in a very difficult situation and understanding of the suffering of the parents of the murderer, because they'd also lost a son in that incident. Strangely enough, in the way metta and karuna supports more metta and karuna, later on the mother of the murderer heard that one of the families, their son had shot this little girl, She didn't die, but her brain was severely damaged, so she became kind of totally helpless. Had to go home, stay in a bed in the on the ground floor of the house, and had to have 24-hour care because she couldn't help herself anymore, and there was no hope of recovery. And after being so touched by the forgiveness of the parents of the children who died, the mother of the murderer went to see this family to express her sorrow, and she had heard from the journalist that, this family can never have a family meal again because they've always got to have at least one person looking after their daughter. So they can never, and for them to have a family meal, sit around the table was a very important thing. But they could never have that again because they had to look after the daughter all the time. So the mother of the murderer said, "Can you give me permission? Once a week I'll come when you have dinner and I'll sit with your daughter and look after her so you can have a family dinner." And she's been doing that for like years and years on end. So she practiced compassion for them, they practiced compassion for her. You see, when you see stories like that, you're probably all over the world, there's stories like that in different ways, different forms. And this is metta, karuna in practice. But often you don't hear these stories, so we often don't realize what's going on in the world. But when you practice metta, then obviously you become more attuned to it, so you notice it. You notice the metta between people, families, and often between strangers, which is amazing. Even in the animal kingdom, sometimes they have strange stories. Like we used to have a photo of 2 leopards who brought up a little baby deer. Normally leopards eat deer, but these leopard couple, they actually brought up a deer, protected it and stayed with it. Things like that. It's always possible for metta to arise in situations, but we have to find it. And the Buddha said it's our instinct as human beings to seek happiness, true happiness. But unfortunately, we often go in the wrong way. So when you're practicing metta, you realize the reason when you're angry that you display your anger is because you're going in the wrong direction. You say, if I display it, I'll feel better. So you go and tell someone off, or you seek revenge in some way, or write a nasty email, or whatever you do when you're angry, and you think you're going to feel better because you do that. But as the Buddha pointed out, anger never ends anger. Hatred is never ended by more hatred. And again, you see that in the world. As long as people keep following their hatred, speaking, acting, or even just thinking with hatred, it gets worse. And when you practice metta, you see that. You see the way of solving the problem is not following your anger, your hatred, saying it, acting on it, even though temporarily you might feel some kind of relief from it. Also, the way is not to suppress it either, and that's another thing people do. They bottle it up inside. They get physical and mental tension building up because they're holding on to anger. They're neither letting it out, but they're not becoming aware of it and mindful of it. They're just pressing it inside, maybe try and distract themselves through other things. The way you see with the practice of metta is to bring up mindfulness, and with the heart of metta, when metta is established with mindfulness, then to look at that anger and see it as a painful experience, as suffering that's arising in your own mind. Once you can see that, then just like when you have a kid that's very upset or angry, you soothe them, calm them down, and maybe once they calm down they can realize the cause of their anger is not something they have to hold on to anymore. They can let it go. Often very small things make us angry, but because we're not mindful, the emotion and the thinking builds it up to something very big in the mind. When you practice metta, though, you're doing the opposite. You're soothing your mind. There may still be genuine painful feeling, memories, thoughts, but you're soothing them, and with mindfulness you're teaching yourself, and you don't need to display it, follow it. You don't need to push it aside either. You just accept it and then gradually let it go. Just knowing it and knowing the suffering of holding on, you want to let go. So metta meditation, it runs into pretty much any other meditation technique you do. So that's why it's very good to begin a session of meditation with the practice of metta. Obviously, as the mind becomes one-pointed, start to experience samadhi, and you get sense of calm, concentration, piti, sukha arise. The Buddha said piti is the direct opposite of anger, ill will. And when piti is present in the mind, we have rapture, joy. Ill will can't be in the mind at the same time. So whatever meditation technique you're developing, as you become more calm, one-pointed, concentrated, then anger will definitely subside. But that's not as powerful as when you are contemplating and you're seeing anger with mindfulness, and you see the suffering of it, and then you let go. The sense of piti that arises then is even stronger. And we probably all can experience this, not just when you're meditating, but in daily life, when you're about to lose your temper, or hatred is there bubbling up in your mind, but you catch it, see what's happening, you teach yourself, and this is not the way to go. I'm not going to speak or act, I'm not going to do anything, I'm going to turn my attention to something better. And there's different ways we can do that. Sometimes you turn the mind to think of the good qualities of that person that you're angry with, even if there's only a very little. With some people, all we can know and remember is the bad stuff. So the Buddha said it's like when you're in the desert and you're desperate for water, because you're so thirsty you may even risk dying, and you come across a little bit of water in the hoof print of a cow that's walked through. Normally you wouldn't think of drinking water, or rainwater is collected in the hoof print. There's only a little bit of it, and if you were to use your hand to scoop it up, you'd get mud. You'd ruin that water. The only way you could drink it properly is to lie down, literally put your mouth onto the water and just suck it up with your tongue, so you can get clean water without getting the earth and the dirt in it, in your mouth. So he said, when you have someone you really don't like and only think of them with anger, ill will, that's what you have to do. You have to really find the goodness in them, the common humanity. He said, if there's really nothing else, you can see that you're friends in the sense you and them both suffer old age, sickness and death. And there's no one any different in the world, and nobody wants old age, sickness and death. At the very least you can sympathize or empathize with them on that level. Or sometimes we just imagine, and you can imagine even someone who you don't like has probably done good things in the past. Even your worst enemy is bound to have done some good things. You have to work hard to think of them, bring them up, and then your anger doesn't seem so strong or so reasonable. The aim of this practice of metta, you get to the point where the mind is one-pointed, meaning it's just fixed on the thought of, may I be well, may all beings be well, free from suffering. It's completely established in the mind, so nothing can shake that away. So unshakable loving kindness when samadhi arises. And then you practice it, the Buddha said, in all directions to all beings. So like we chanted, the weak, the strong, the near, the far, even the born and those to be born. So beings you can't even see, beings in other realms still practice metta. Sometimes they say to humans and non-humans. So obviously animals, but even ghosts and devas. So basically just covering every direction, every possible life form. Because the mind is one-pointed, it can do that. So you're building up to the point where there's no space for the negative thought, the doubt to come in. You're just sticking with this thought of kindness and you spread in all directions. So physically and mentally you feel very good, completely at ease. Even if you have pain or illness, it doesn't matter, the mind is completely at ease. And then interaction with other people, at least when this metta is maintained, you're at ease. It doesn't matter even if you meet difficult or aggressive people or whatever. The metta is maintained. In many areas in his teachings, the Buddha talked about the benefits of metta. So one who practices metta every day attains samadhi easily. They sleep easily. Some of you have problems sleeping. Cold nights, hard floor, anxiety about health or relationships. Spread metta before you go to sleep. Do a metta meditation. You sleep well, you wake up well. You feel healthy, you feel at ease. The Buddha said the devas will protect you when you practice metta. Beings, guardian angels, beings you can't see, will still protect you. Maybe in ways you can't imagine. Animals respond to metta, humans respond to metta. It brings all kinds of benefit, but most useful is calms the mind, samadhi arises easily, and then you can develop insight. And what is the most compassionate thought you can have for another human being? Well, you wish them to attain nibbana. This is where we're always being challenged, isn't it? You have someone you love. If they said, I'm going off to become a monk or a nun for nibbana, well, can't you stay with me a little bit longer? Just a little bit longer. You don't have to go off just quite yet. So what does that mean? That means you don't want them to be free from suffering. And you want them to stay close to you. It's metta becomes clingy like that. We cling to each other from metta, but it's not full metta. There's some metta and then some attachment, some delusion. So in the time of the Buddha, the example they always lift up, Mahakassapa and his wife. They both had faith arise in the Buddha, wanting to, or in spiritual practice, wanting to attain nibbana. They got married mainly through family pressure, social pressure, but then they never slept together. They always had a fence of flowers between them, and they never crossed it. And they always had their own aspiration for nibbana. Eventually they told each other and they agreed, we'll just give everything over to the family and we'll head off in our ways. And they walked off to become monk and nun and eventually separated at the crossroads. And it's an ideal, obviously, it's just a legend, but ideally that's how it is. If you really love someone, whether it's a male relative, a friend, or a female, you want nibbana. So if they're ready to become a monk or a nun, can support them. If they're truly ready and it's at suitable time, then support them. So the highest practice of metta is purifying our own minds from greed, anger, delusion, and then wishing the same for others, supporting others in their practice, appreciating them when they do well and are successful, empathizing when they're suffering and supporting them through that, but accepting we all have our karma, so we have to go through different obstacles, and we can help each other, but sometimes we have to also be very patient and accept some things. There's nothing much we can do until the conditions change. So we have a little bit of time left this morning. We can carry on practicing. If you want to do some metta meditation till we finish, or your usual meditation object, that's fine.